Are these judges the guardians of the Constitution or the enemies of the people? Have you been watching, or do you find the proceedings enthralling, or does it move you only to tears of boredom?
I think my answer to that would be it's been some of the most tedious television that I think I've ever seen. I don't understand how they can justify doing rolling coverage of it.
Well, I think the ponderous and leaden-footed people have been the highly paid government half-back line of Wright, Eadie and Keane, whereas the Lord Panic is a man who is not just a great lawyer, but a man of great eloquence and interest.
Well, he's certainly more entertaining in the way that he's doing it. I'll give you that.
And James Wolfe's on today for the Scottish Government. He's a man of panache as well. Now, it's not just, I admit, it's not just the performance, it's the content that counts, as Ed Balls found out and Strictly Come Dancing.
Let's not go there.
But nonetheless,
let's just remind people
looks bad for the government so far.
You can watch us on Facebook Live or the LBC website at lbc.co.uk. But most importantly of all, the lines are open for you to put your questions to Alex Salmond for the next half an hour. 0345 6060 973. Let's kick off with Gary, who's in Glasgow. Hello, Gary.
Yeah, good afternoon. Hi, Alex.
Hi, Gary. On you go.
Thank you. I had a few friends around last night, and we were talking about getting work, job centres, things like that. And apparently I'm told that there are job centre closures. And this concerns me, and I thought, well, what do you think about this?
Well, I think there's been a range of cutbacks to both job centres and social security, but given that where social security is very controversial, because obviously people like myself think the sanctions regime is a dreadful thing and the government thinks it's a good thing. However, given that we all think helping people into employment is a good thing, it seems kind of strange that cutbacks are also falling on job centres as well as on the general social security budget. You'd think you'd be maximising the attempt to find people jobs. Gary?
Yes, I mean, that concerns me too. Job centres have a very important role to play, and considering how very difficult it is, particularly in poverty-stricken areas where people are trying to find work and need that support, to think that they're cutting back, and it's bad enough that many people are unable to are being brought into the job centres who are not very conversant with new technology and things like that, and now they're facing closures. It just makes it life more difficult for them, and it concerned me enough to give you a call to see what your views about that were.
I don't know if you caught last week, Gary, my young colleague Mary Black, who's 21, she may even be 22 now, but she's the youngest MP in the House of Commons, and she was making a speech about the sanctions regime, and she'd been to a lot of job centres and social security offices with the Commons Select Committee. And one of the points that Mary made was that she'd found some very good examples in certain areas, but in certain areas some very bad examples. And she was tracing this to the pressure of work and turnover in staff, and where staff themselves are demoralised, perhaps through job insecurity, perhaps because of the workload they have, then inevitably the standard of service that they're able to give also falls. And she had some very telling examples, both of good practice where things were working well, and where things were letting people down very badly indeed. And I can only believe that closing job centres is going to increase the bad practice and reduce the good practice.
Well, just for a bit of balance, the Department for Work and Pensions have said the closures in Glasgow would save public money. They reflect an increase in the use of online and telephone services. Under the plans, they say there'll be no job losses among Job Centre Plus staff, and claimants would not have to travel further than 4 miles or 40 minutes.
Yes, well, 40 minutes strikes me as a good amount of time. I mean, one point that Mary made, and she gave chapter and verse of examples of people. For example, the assumption that people are going to be able to do things online assumes they've got an online connection, which is not necessarily the case if you're on your uppers. The assumption you can wait at the end of a phone line is the assumption, and we've seen with the companies involved in social security some dramatic bills falling on claimants. And the assumption that 40 minutes to a job centre is easy for people who are on tight budgets, I think, is a very hard one as well. So I agree with Gary.
Let's move on to the big issue of the day. Kevin's in Doncaster. Kevin, what's your question, please?
Hiya.
On you go, Kevin.
Alex, my question to you is, obviously you're a very well-oiled politician yourself, and what I would like to ask you, now that it's gone through the High Court, now going through the Supreme Court, could it go on to the European Court?
Well, interestingly enough, Kevin, that one thing the two sides have agreed on is not to talk about issues. This has been agreed between both sides, which would cause a reference to the European Court. So trying to have it decided in the Supreme Court. This is one of the few points of agreement between both sides. I love the description of being a well-oiled politician. I'll take that as being meant as a compliment.
I'm not even going to ask him what he means by that.
4 o'clock in the afternoon, for goodness sake. But one thing I do think is really important, and I watched the speech of James Wolfe, the Lord Advocate of Scotland, just as I was coming into the studio. And he was making some really fundamental points which get to the real heart of this issue. He was pointing out that since the claim of right in Scotland and the Bill of Rights in England in the late 17th century, then it's always been the constitutional assumption that Parliament makes and unmakes laws. It's not done by the Crown, the royal prerogative, or ministers. That seems to me overriding this whole argument a very strong one. So I think this is going...
Article 50 isn't a law. It's part of an international treaty. The law will be the repeal of will be the Great Repeal Act, as they're calling it, which, of course, Parliament does decide. So I'm not sure what relevance that point is.
Well, they should have added you to the government team, Iain. But the point that was made against that is that this, by invoking it, and it's irrevocable, it can't be revoked, then you are stating and undoing legislation in the European Communities Act from the 1970s. And as for the Great Repeal Act, well, you cannot cite an act that's not even been introduced into Parliament as yet as being the evidence for a piece of legislation. That's why the government lost.
Just for the record, I don't believe the government should have taken this to the Supreme Court. I think they should have accepted the High Court decision and just introduced a bill into Parliament at that point.
Or even more so, you would have thought that the clever thing to do would have been a week let's say after Theresa May became Prime Minister, to take a resolution through both houses of Parliament, and then it would be much more difficult to argue the case for legislation in Parliament being ignored. But, we are where we are, and where I think we're going is to the House of Commons and the House of Lords at some time in January.
Yeah, no, I agree. But what do you think the result tonight will... I mean, clearly the government's going to win tonight because they're supporting the Labour amendment and they put their own amendment in as well. But how many Tory MPs and Labour MPs do you think are going to vote against their official party line?
Well, I think rebellions will be minimal today because of the way this has come about. That Labour put down a motion. The government apparently made a concession by saying they would show everyone a sight of ankle. They would just let a little tantalising tease of their negotiating position be published before the Article 50 vote. And then the Labour Party accepted the government amendment, which of course seems to commit them to a timetable of implementing Article 50 by the end of March.
Well, that's what they're committed to. That's surely something that if Theresa May went back on that, there would be uproar among the Brexiteers, there'd be uproar among the Conservative Party, and it would be very embarrassing for her.
Theresa May's committed to it, but I'm not certain why the Labour Party have got themselves committed to it by accepting that government.
We all know why, because Jeremy Corbyn secretly wants to come out.
I'm just saying, in that, given that it's difficult to say who won and who lost that parliamentary tussle over the last 24 hours, then I'm sure the potential rebels in both sets will be just as confused as everybody else, therefore probably will decide not to rebel in large numbers at 7 o'clock tonight.
Well, it'll be very interesting to see. Remember, you can, of course, watch us on Facebook Live and on the LBC website at lbc.co.uk. Patrick is in Colchester. Hello, Patrick.
Oh, hello, Ian. Hello, Mr. Salmond. I know, Mr. Salmond, you're one of the great minds in British politics, but I'm at a loss to understand why you would want to take Scotland out of the United Kingdom, where it's such a much respected nation and such a respected part of the United Kingdom, and take it into the European Union. And would you ever think of looking across the sea at Ireland? Would you want to become a country like Ireland, where it has no respect, is known as a grovelling nation, bound and scraping? Surely you don't want your great nation to become like Ireland.
Well, I've just back from Ireland, Patrick, and I have a much more positive view of the Republic of Ireland than you have. And I think the Republic of Ireland is a much transformed place, not just in the last 30 years where it's been fundamentally transformed, but in picking itself up from the financial crisis. I mean, I saw something in the papers yesterday saying the UK was the fastest growing major economy in Europe. And the reason that they said major economy is the Republic of Ireland is growing faster than the UK. So the Republic of Ireland looks to me like it's well on the road to recovery. And in addition to the better economic prospects in the Republic of Ireland just now, I can assure you that the other things of which Ireland is famed are there in full abundance in my experience of the last few weeks.
I mean, I think all independent countries can be respected. Everyone has to earn that respect. And no one's suggesting that I think Scotland couldn't exist on its own. But surely Patrick's point is right, that if you come out of the United Kingdom, economically, I mean, forget any other argument. Economically, that would be damaging for Scotland, just as you argue that if the United Kingdom comes out of Europe, it would be damaging for the United Kingdom.
No, I argue if the United Kingdom does not secure its position within the single marketplace, that will be damaging. You don't have to, incidentally, I would argue you don't even have to be part of the European Union to achieve that position. You just need to be part of the single marketplace. I think if you're out with the single marketplace, then that will be economically damaging. I see no reason whatsoever why Scotland and England shouldn't trade freely when Scotland's an independent country.
Okay.
Indeed, I would advocate that for both Scotland and England.
Let's move on to something very timely. Ali is in Islington. Hello, Ali.
Oh, hello. How are you?
Very well, thank you. What would you like to ask,
Hi, Ali,
Alex?
on you go.
Yeah. Hi, thank you. Alex, I was, the other hot topic, especially for somebody from the United States, is Time Magazine naming Donald Trump the Person of the Year. Now, none of us have been able to read that article as of yet. I was just wondering what you think about that.
Ali,
I don't know which way that article slants.
Creative thinking, I would think, Ali. But I picked up, somebody sent me something that Donald Trump had said about this very list of the people of the year, the Time Magazine list in 2013. And I've got it here. This is what the Donald said about it in 2013. He said It was a Time Magazine list of 100 most influential people is a joke. This stunt of a magazine, like Newsweek, will soon be dead. Bad list. Now, I'm quite certain that if a tweet follows, and I'm sure one surely will, it will be great list, great choice. This magazine will last forever. It's the greatest magazine in the world. I think in the fairness to Time Magazine, as I understand it, Ali, it's not a popularity contest, the contest of being the man of the year. It's the person who's had the most impact for good or ill. I mean, I think, a few millennia ago, then Genghis Khan could have won such a contest if Time.
That's what I was going to say, because he is my person of the year, the person being the dictator of the year.
How is he? Who's a dictator?
Well, it's not yet.
Trump.
Well, I think the sort of cabinet he's setting up.
Well, he's just been elected. How can he be a dictator when he's just been elected by the American people?
Oh, okay. Well, the president-elect dictator. I don't know. Person of the year.
Nothing like exaggerating to make a point.
But never mind, Ali. I think we know you were coining a phrase as opposed to being taken literally. But I think we're agreed. The Time Magazine says it's the person of the year because it's the person who's had most impact. We'll all just have to cross our fingers and hope that his impact next year, when he actually becomes a president, it won't be as disastrous as we fear. Yeah,
I agree. And hopefully, there has been a lot of media blackouts. So I'll be interested to see what the slant that they take.
OK then, Ali, thanks for phoning.
Just a word on the Richmond by-election last week, which I'm not sure what you expected the result to be. I didn't think the Liberal Democrats would pull through, but they absolutely did. And in a sense, I described it, and you may think this is a bit of hyperbole, the day that Tim Farron came of age as Liberal Democrat leader, because that was his strategy to go after the 48%. What danger do you think that poses for Jeremy Corbyn throughout the country, though? Because if the Lib Dems pitch themselves as the party of the 48%, they may well take a lot of Labour votes in Labour Conservative marginals.
I think in some ways, Iain, it's more dangerous for Labour than it is good for the Liberal Democrats. Now, incidentally, congratulations on their victory and the lady who won. But I think that the problem is that the other by-elections are forthcoming. Let's put it that way. And as they come up, I think they'll find it difficult to replicate exactly the circumstances that carried them to victory
tomorrow.
last week.
They're not going to do well in that one.
Well, that would be a case in point, because a different type of constituency. The only similarity was it was held by the Conservatives, but in terms of socio-economics, in terms of their attitude to Europe, a very different type of constituency. But if you were to get a consistent pattern, the Liberals did well last week, but perhaps do badly tomorrow. UKIP didn't even stand last week. Perhaps will do better tomorrow, perhaps. But Labour did badly in both. Then it's more dangerous for Labour than it is, great news for the Liberal Democrats. But time will tell. I mean, people often dismiss by-elections. I don't, because even if seats aren't cephalogically the same, it does change the atmosphere. So, Tim Farron has been regarded as a bit of a joke, basically. There'll be people who are not laughing quite as hard as they have been as a result of the party winning. Nothing gives somebody credibility more than a party actually winning something.
And it's the first time they've actually won a by-election from another party for at least 10 years. Nick Clegg never won one at all.
Well, in fairness, Nick Clegg, he did the first thing that the Liberal Democrat never thought of doing, or the Liberals before him, and that's gone into government. And it's more difficult, a lot more difficult, to win anything from government than it is to win it from opposition.
Do you think also, going on from that, is there a possibility in 2020, I mean, say Brexit goes horribly wrong, maybe it hasn't even happened by then, the Conservatives rebel against Theresa May, Labour does rather better than people expect at the moment, the Liberal Democrats do much better, you retain all your seats in Scotland. Can you see the possibility of Jeremy Corbyn leading a so-called rainbow coalition?
I think anything's possible in politics.
Certainly is this year.
And therefore we should discount no possibility whatsoever. Jeremy's leadership ratings are a difficulty for an election. But, there were some signs. Remember we discussed this. There were some signs, I thought, at Prime Minister's questions that he was starting to improve a bit, and then kind of fell back again. So, he's got time enough left. But one thing's certain, I think the government... Well, I think it's certain the government are looking less certain. I don't think the government looks sure-footed on the European thing at all, and I think there's plenty of pitfalls are looming up, and some of these chasms might appear pretty early on in the new year.
But you certainly don't rule out the possibility of Jeremy Corbyn becoming Prime Minister.
No, I think it's unlikely, but it's not impossible.
And if he did, you must talk about this with your SNP colleagues in Westminster. What's the general view of maybe doing some sort of deal with Labour in those circumstances?
Well, the general view of the SNP is that in these circumstances, we would look for a progressive alliance. I mean, that's the view we articulated last year. That would still be our view, and we're certainly not discounting or not trying to tell another party who their leader should be. I suppose, generally speaking, the SNP, although critical, obviously, of the Labour Party leadership in a whole range of ways, and not least last week when Jeremy went home as opposed to voting, as he should have done, to haul Mr Blair before a committee to be held to account for Iraq. But nonetheless, we've been, I suspect, friendlier to many of the things that Jeremy has put forward than, for example, Labour MPs have.
But I don't really understand this concept of a progressive alliance, because presumably if you did some sort of deal with Jeremy Corbyn, independents would have to form some part of it. And of course, from Labour's point of view, if that happened and Scotland went independent, all the Scottish seats go and you get a permanent Tory majority in England.
Well, what we'd argue, the progressive alliance doesn't depend on a concession of independence. It might involve an independence referendum. No, it doesn't. It might involve an independence referendum. It depends. It would certainly involve the people of Scotland having the right to choose independence.
But that's not a major get, is it? Because Nicola Sturgeon says she's going to have one anyway.
Well, indeed. But you asked me to say why it might be appealing. A progressive alliance might involve other things which would transform the political situation. Proportional representation, for example, it might provide...
And that wouldn't need a referendum.
Well, there's been a referendum before on PR, but it was a very bad form of PR that was put forward. But I'm just saying...
But if the electorate rejected a very mild form of PR, they're hardly likely to want the next stage, are they?
Well, I don't think that follows in the slightest. I think one of the arguments against alternative vote, it wasn't really PR. If you're going to change the system in favour of proportional representation, representation, you might as well change it towards something that resembles
No,
proportional representation.
I agree with that, but do you not think that people would have to be consulted?
You agreed with me. Yes.
I did agree with you. I don't agree with BR. But do you not think the electorate would need to be consulted
I
on
would
that?
tend to support the view if you're changing the electoral system, then you need a referendum.
We agree again.
I'm merely trying to make the point here that there's a range of policies that you could agree on in terms of a platform. It wouldn't even necessarily involve, for example, the SNP being in government. The SNP could provide support for a limited number of objectives.
That any agreement, coalition deal, pact, whatever you want to call it, it would have to involve at least an independence referendum.
Yes, it would have to involve progress for Scotland on the constitutional question. But of course, in such a arrangement just now, I mean, if we had an election, for example, if the government runs into the sands, as seems not unlikely over the next 2 or 3 years, and gets the ship of Conservative state hits the rocks of Europe, then it's not unlikely that the European dimension would loom large in these talks.
Just on this idea of a deal with Labour, Morva has phoned in from Bury St Edmunds. Hello, Morva.
Hi there, Ian.
Hi.
Hello, Morva. On you go.
Hi there, Alec. Alec, you're saying that there's a possibility that Labour could do some sort of deal in probably the same way Nicola Sturgeon said you could lock the Tories out, and we all know how that turned out. I don't think that's going to happen, and here's why. Because every single motion that the SNP put forward, Labour won't support you in it. It's the Bain principle again, the unwritten rule that they won't support SNP motions. Now, if they turned up last Friday for Mary Black's bill in enough numbers, am I not right in saying that could have gone to a second stage? And they didn't, did they?
Well, that's correct. I mean, Mary Black's bill could have had got on to a committee stage. You have to have enough votes for a closure motion, and that would have involved the Labour Party supporting something that they actually supported. So you've got a very fair point there.
Well, the thing is, Alec, this is a party that's supposed to be the party of the people, and it appears to put itself first, even when a bill such as Mary's bill could help the most disadvantaged, the most sought after people that can't find their way out of the problems they're in without some help. We've had this business today of the job centre closures. Is this another example of the poll tax, where they used that as an experiment and they're now going to close all the job centres and see how that works in Scotland?
Well, I mean, look, I'm not here obviously to speak for the Labour Party, and the points you make are very, very strong ones indeed. But then, if I didn't agree with you on these points, then I might be a member of the Labour Party. But I'm asked to postulate, if offered the choice between influencing a government on progressive lines or being subjected to a Tory majority government, then I would take the first. I would think a progressive coalition would be better than a Tory majority government. Now, you rightly say that that didn't work out last time. The reason it didn't work out last time was that Ed Miliband couldn't win seats in England. He could hardly win any seats at all, actually. He lost lots of seats in England. Therefore, the whole thing didn't come off. But, it's possible that this Conservative government might run towards the rocks very quickly on the European issue. And I think there's all sorts of signs. Yes, indeed. It's happened before, and it certainly could happen again.
OK, Morva, thank you very much indeed. Humza Yousaf, he's the SNP Transport Minister. Rising star of the SNP, someone who's often on this programme, very impressive politician. He's been caught driving without car insurance. He's Transport Minister. Surely he has to quit.
No, I mean, if you look at the circumstances, I think most people would say that while, of course, nobody should be have a situation where they're driving without insurance, and therefore, as he said, he has to take the consequences of that. I mean, his marriage split up. He was on, presumably, as I read it, his wife's insurance policy, as I am, incidentally, and didn't realise he'd have to move to be the first named person on the insurance policy. Now, it's embarrassing for him, of course it is, but most people looking at these circumstances and hearing the explanation will not be demanding people's head over something like that.
Are you telling me that if Chris Grayling, the Secretary of State for Transport, had been caught in similar circumstances, you wouldn't be the first to call for his head?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Really?
And I think if you check the record, you'll find I have never called for people's resignation on personal circumstances.
It's not personal circumstances. This is driving without insurance. If I did that, I would be convicted of it, and I'd have to take the consequences.
And no doubt. I mean, let's see what the courts do with Humza Yousaf. But I mean, he'll take the consequences like everyone else. Incidentally, when politicians end up in these circumstances, the right thing to do is to... I mean, I remember once Russell Johnston, the late and very colourful and very, very good, actually, Member of Parliament for Inverness, Liberal Party, was speeding in the A9, and for one reason or another didn't end up with a speeding ticket. And he ended up a front page in the A9 saying the local MP has got off with speeding. Whereas if he'd ended up with a speeding ticket and paid his 30 quid, I think it was in these days, and got his 3 points in the licence, he'd have been unlucky for it to be a footnote in page 8. So the watchword for members of Parliament, when they're caught in something like this, when they've made an honest mistake, is take the consequences just like everybody else, and then you'll find that a week later, far from... calling for your resignation, most people won't remember it.
Well, to be fair, the Scottish Conservatives, they're saying we don't believe this is a resignation matter either. So you're in good company, Alex.
But they don't have the same killer instinct as Iain Dale.
Indeed. Look, I like the guy. I don't wish ill on him at all. But I think from a public point of view, they'll see this yet again as a politician who's done something wrong and gets away with it.
No, he won't get away with it because he'll go to court and he'll take the consequences just like everyone else. I actually think on things like this, you'll find that the members of the public are really forgiving. What they won't forgive is a politician who, for some reason, didn't then take the consequences in court.
Finally, Ben in Brighton. Hello, Ben.
Hi, Iain. Hi, Alex.
Hi, Ben. On you go.
I wanted to ask Alex, please. Are we not now returning to a position of turkeys on Christmas to return to the EU situation?
Who's the turkeys?
Are we pinning our hopes that the EU is going to give us such favourable disengagement terms that they're not likely to encourage other member states to leave the EU? Is that really where we're resting?
I think you're nailed on, Ben. You see, my view on this is that, and I'm trying, let's forget the fact I'm pro-Europe. Let's forget the fact I believe in independence for Scotland, just for a second. If I was thinking about how to negotiate the position on Brexit, the very last thing I'd be doing right now is invoking Article 50. I would keep the other side waiting until they told me that they were going to give us a reasonable deal at the other side of Article 50.
Well, they're never going to do that.
Well, I'm not so sure about that, but certainly...
Why would they?
But because until we vote Article 50, there is no deadline, there is no time limit, there is no guillotine hanging over. As soon as Theresa May pushes the button, if she gets it through Parliament early in the new year, then you're on that 2-year time clock and it's ticking. And when the guillotine comes down, when the music stops, everything is on the side of the European Union and nothing is on the side of the UK. And believe me, unless there is goodwill, there'll be nothing in place in terms of other trade deals. You'll be out the single market.
Well, we can have a lot of other trade deals in place for the day when we come out anyway.
Then if Liam Fox manages within the next 18 months to negotiate all these wonderful trade deals, then I'll come back here and I'll say, I misjudged the man. Liam Fox is clearly the most wonderful negotiator.
That's what Theresa May's visit to the Gulf states is all about, isn't it? Well, we do £22 billion a year of business with these Gulf states, more than we do with India. That's why she's there, to make sure that we do get these trade agreements with them.
But coming out of the single marketplace does not augment our deals with the Gulf. That's the point I'm trying to make. We've not been inhibited.
You talk as if we won't be able to trade with Europe after we come out.
Well, that's it's not a question of whether you'll be able to trade. I mean, look, people talk about access to the single market. Everybody's got access to the single market.
Exactly.
I mean, the Patagonian shoe manufacturers have access to the single market. The advantage is being within it when none of your goods can be questioned either on tariff or, for that matter, on regulation.
We voted to come out of it.
No, we voted to come out of the European Union.
Which the single market is an integral part of. It was created by the European Union.
But Theresa May, this red, white and blue Brexit she's talking about...
It's a ridiculous phrase, I totally agree. But Alex, why don't you just level with us and tell us that really you want to see it delayed because you think the longer we delay it, the more likely is that it'll never happen?
No, one of the reasons I'm taking the stance I'm doing in terms of arguing for I know that it would be better economically to be within the single marketplace. That applies to Scotland. It also applies to all of the UK.
But it would be better economically for Scotland to be part of the United Kingdom, but you're quite happy not to be.
Well, I dispute that here. I mean, I think...
It's clear as night
follows
day.
As David Davis, that oracle of all things the Brexiteers, said recently to Ireland, he said Ireland shouldn't have to choose between its trade with the UK and its trade with Europe. If that applies to Ireland, it equally applies to Scotland. I want to see us free trading with both the rest of the UK and being within that single marketplace.
We have to leave it there. Alex Salmond, thank you very much. We'll see you same time, same place next week.